to beyoungministry.blogspot.com to another podcast out of the book of Ephesians. We're in chapter 5 in verses 8 through 10, which reads, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord." That's Ephesians 5, 8 through 10. Paul tells us we were darkness. Darkness defined us. And darkness is the absence of light. Due to the fact that there is no such thing as darkness, we were defined by that which is non-existent. And from the beginning, it was a lie. We all lugged loads we weren't never intended to carry. Fear, worry, discontent. No wonder we get so weary. We're worn out from carrying this excessive baggage. While we were darkness, hidden from us was the heart of God for us. We naturally concluded He was out to get us, just like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So we ran, thinking that we could find our way on our own to no avail. Do you remember when you realized that you needed the Lord Jesus? I was in my shower just 3 days before my dad died. It was October 29th, 1981. My mother had died when I was 5 in 1969. And that particular day in October, I was broken. My brokenness allowed God's light to shine in, though. This is it. We must be willing to let Him shine in and through our darkness. This is Christianity. Christ shining through the cracks of our broken existence. The light, Paul tells us, is in the Lord. The light is the Lord Himself. He drives out darkness. Darkness frightens us. Not being able to see is scary. But God's way is to live by faith, to live looking for Him with our hearts. Paul reminds us in verse 8, we are now light in the Lord. The key in this statement is the phrase, in the Lord. Living out of this new place where God defines us is what it means for us to be the light now. We lack this point of view because it is the product of two things: that we turn to the Lord in the midst of our trials and hearing His voice in that context. But we avoid pain, pressure, and problems. And in so doing, we miss the opportunity to grow in faith or our heart's ability to see God. Darkness is useful, though. Darkness magnifies the light. It creates a platform for God Himself in our lives. It provides a contrast, and sometimes it's a dramatic contrast. The light is the Lord Himself. Without the darkness, we do not know Him. We don't know His presence. We don't know His life. Paul in verse 8 tells us to walk as children of the light. Children are helpless, dependent. We are most spiritual when we are children, or like children. Christianity is the preoccupation of our hearts with our Creator, the Lord Jesus Himself. As a result, when something of God comes out of our lives, He gets the credit. He is our pursuit. The fruit of curiosity is fueled pursuit. And as we have pointed out many times before, faith is divine persuasion. It's God choosing to use all manner of communication to convince us that He's not only there, but He's acutely involved in our lives, and He's good, despite the fact that bad things happen. in our lives. Paul mentions the fruit of the Spirit in verse 9 because the light is God Himself and His presence is recognized by the fruit of Himself. And the soil of this fruit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, as he points out in verse 9. Goodness here is the Greek noun agathosune. This word denotes the excellence of the object being described. It includes the idea of uprightness and generosity. So when we embrace the goodness of God, the potential of His fruit is realized in our lives. It's not just the goodness of God, but it's His righteousness. The Greek word used here is dikaiosune, which means what is right and just. It includes the act of doing what is in agreement with God's standards, the state of being in proper relationship with God. The soil is God's goodness, God's righteousness, and finally, God's truth. The Greek word used for truth is aletheia, which means genuine, reliable, trustworthy, valid. Knowing the one who Himself is the truth frees us from the shackles that have long held us in bondage from Him in His perfect ways. Not that we have to be perfect. No, He's the only one that's perfect. Our pursuit is not our perfection. It's His. And it's out of this threefold soil, goodness, righteousness, and truth, that the fruits of the Spirit are expressed in us, to us, and through us. Finally, this fueled pursuit is underscored in verse 10 when Paul writes, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. It is in the context of relationship that we discover the expression of the Lord Himself, this one who is the light. My friends, I trust this podcast is helpful to you in your walk with the Lord. If I can be of any help to you, shoot me an email at beyoungministry@gmail.com. Hey, have a great day.